Before we jump into the lists, let's keep in mind a few things. Number one, we're going to be keeping the cost down by buying high point per dollar value models. Number two, we're going to be making the list in increments so that you can play as you build up your army. You should not be buying all of this all at once. You will get overwhelmed. Number three, we're going to avoid resin models because Games Workshop resin is bad and overpriced. Number four, we're going to make the list strong enough so that you will not automatically lose your games when you go up to play. It will actually come down to your abilities. And number five, I'm not going to be listing all the good models for an army. If your favorite models aren't here, you can cut something out from my list so that you can run that instead. Today we're going to be talking about the Eldar. The Eldar are your typical elf archetype, but in space. They're very fast, they're very in tune with their magic, they're very spiritual, they live very long lives, and they make up one of the oldest living factions in Warhammer 40k. At one point, they were arguably the most populous race in the universe, where even death couldn't stop them as they would just be reborn. They ultimately fell from grace when their hedonism birthed the chaos god Slaanesh, losing literal billions upon billions of Eldar lives. Every Eldar life is now incredibly valuable. They are no longer reborn, instead their souls are pulled into the warp to sustain Slaanesh. Now they move around in caravan planets called craft worlds. These are continent-sized ships where the Eldar live their lives, farm, train, etc. They have a pantheon of gods, but the most relevant of them being Ynid, the god of the dead. If you want to collect Eldar, keep in mind they are fast. Their units on average are going to move about 1 to 4 inches further than their counterparts in other armies. They also have a lot of tricks up their sleeve. Between fire and fade abilities, reactionary movement, easy fallback and shoot/charge, it makes it all very hard to pin an Eldar down. Because of their speed and trickery, Eldar are also rarely ever a bad army. 40k is a game about board control at the end of the day, and being faster than everyone else makes board control much easier. The secondary game is also very easy for Eldar, between mid-game redeploys, 20+ inch moving units, and solid lone ops. The new detachments do a really nice job of giving you more build-around options. They are pretty clear about what kinds of units are best in each detachment. Wraith constructs like being in the Wraith construct detachment. The bikes like being in the bike detachment. And aspect warriors like being in the aspect warrior detachment. Out of the 8 detachments that they have, I would say about 6 of them are pretty good. The aspects are great as characters for new players as they are all pretty cost efficient compared to other characters you might want to buy, and they really help offset the cost of the first aspect warrior you buy for each type. There are a lot of models that just got a range refresh, and Eldar no longer have to rely on 30+ year old models just to be able to play the game. There are some things that you do have to be aware of when you do collect Eldar though. They are a very frail army. All of their speed, tricks, and damage have to come at a cost somewhere. In this case, it's their durability. If you leave your units in a position to die, they will die. There is very little that an Eldar unit can do to survive a lot of focused fire. Eldar can be a very high skill for army because of this. While mobility does make the game easier at a baseline, managing all of the tricks while getting out your damage and keeping your units safe can be very taxing for new players. Eldar can also struggle to hold primary in most of their detachments due to their frailty. They can get on the point, they just might struggle to stay on to it. This does have some ways of being mitigated by certain detachments, such as the Devoted of Ynid and the Spirit Conclave having options to regenerate units and move after death, but it's very limited. Eldar can also really struggle against armies and players that put up some serious aggression because of how easy they can be picked off. As of writing, Aspect Warriors are also looking like they are the best units in the book, but these are also more of the expensive units to buy. They're not a particularly cost-efficient price per point wise. Lastly is the Combat Patrol. While this could be its own section, it's a very weird Combat Patrol. It's got a bit of an Aspect Warrior package with Dire Avengers and Warp Spiders, and it's also got a bit of a Spirit Council package with Spirit Seers and Wraith Blades. These two packages don't work very well together because of the way that their rules overlap. On paper, it is a great deal, but it just doesn't stack up super well as a Combat Patrol you would want to get multiple of. Spirit Council players could arguably get 2, but the extra Dire Avengers are very low value in that detachment. Eldar have probably one of the best army rules in the entire game. Agile Maneuvers takes their already incredible movement, cranks it up to 11, and then cranks it further up to 12. Having 4 separate units being able to do incredibly specific but valuable tools is incredible. You have things like adding 2 inches to your move characteristic, or your opponent can't overwatch you, and suddenly this army that is normally very frail can bypass a lot of issues that they might have to deal with. Being able to do things like go an extra d6 plus 1 inches of movement is always great. Being able to have a fade back in your opponent's shooting phase is incredible. Being able to do extra consolidates is niche, but when it is useful, it is unbelievably powerful. It's all just very good, and you aren't really that limited on how many of these that you can use. The first attachment that we're going to be looking at today is the Aspect Host. Their detachment rule, Path of the Warrior, lets your Aspect Warrior units, or your Avatar of Cain if you want to be a little spicy, reroll hit rolls of 1 or reroll wound rolls of 1. This is just good, straight up damage increase. If you wanted to go down the Aspect Host route, you could also look at War Host, as their lists seem to be pretty much identical. It's just that the War Host is a more agile version of that with extra battle focus tokens and better battle focuses that you can use. For 500 points with every single one of these lists, I'm just going to recommend that you pick up the Combat Patrol for Eldar. It's a good amount of points, it's not that expensive, and while yes, the parts don't necessarily all play that nice together, it does give you a wide enough variety of things that you do want, and even if you are playing a detachment where you don't love them, it's still not that bad of a deal. Like, yes, the Wraith Blades are probably not going to be that valuable here, but hey, you know what? At the very least, they're a Terminator stat line that you throw out onto a midpoint objective to force your opponent to have to overcommit. At 1,000 points, you're going to go and pick yourself up a Wave Serpent, a Blades of Cain so that you can make some Scorpion Warriors. You're going to be picking up an Autarch, and you're also going to be picking up Acerman to be able to lead one of the units of Dire Avengers. Moving on to 1,500 points, you're going to be picking up a box of Fire Dragons, a Howling Banshee, a Fugan, a Janezar, and another Wave Serpent. And then finally, as you round everything out, you're going to be picking up 2 Fire Prisms and 2 boxes of Dark Reapers. If you wanted to get really competitive with this list, you could cut the Fire Prisms for something else if you really wanted to. But Fire Prisms are generally a good unit, and even though they might not be seeing a lot of play in Aspect Hosts, they're still not bad. They're just not as good as 3 units of Fire Dragons. At 500 points, you can really play with the Combat Patrol with any kind of loadout you want. It doesn't really matter. No matter what, you're not going to be getting the best value out of it. Just give the Spirit Seer an enhancement that's relevant if you can, and if you can't, then you're fine. We're going to run Wraith Blades as Wraith Blades with Ghost Axes and Force Shields because the invuln is nice, and like I said, it forces your opponent to have to overcommit in a lot of places, even with heavier AP weapons. Warp Spiders are generally just going to be great value, and the Dire Avengers are going to be fine as either objective holders or kind of a counterpunch. All of these are going to be having their Aspect Host tokens, but I just don't want to put it all up on screen because it's a lot of extra text that isn't needed for something that should be obvious when you're building them. When you're going up to 1,000 points, you're going to be making sure that your Wave Serpent is going to have a Shuriken Cannon and Twin Bright Lance. These are just the best weapons that you can really put onto it. And the Striking Scorpions are going to be running around with their leader having a Chainsword and Scorpion Claw. There are other things that you could do. I just think that this is the best version of that. And being able to have infiltrating units is always going to be nice in a 1,000 point game where you can really start to set the tempo. Osterman inside of a Wave Serpent with Dire Avengers being able to jump in, jump out, do whatever he wants, get his damage out reliably and consistently is going to be incredible no matter what. The Autarch can really lead whatever. You can put him with the Dire Avengers and it'll still be fine. You could put him with Striking Scorpions and it is fine. He's just a great all-around unit. At 1,500 points, you've got Fugan, you've got Fire Dragons. They go together. You've got Janezar, you've got Howling Banshees, they go together. We're really spicing up and trying to get a variety of different types of Aspect Warriors so that you have the ability to play around with different kinds, see what you like, and then move your expansion past 2,000 points into the direction that you felt the most comfortable with. And then finally at 2,000 points, you are going to bring in the 10 Dark Reapers, which are kind of your main primary shooting force that you're going to be relying on. and you're going to be having those fire prisms that are just going to be extra fire support. The detachment rule for the Spirit Conclave is pretty simple. It is all of your Wraith Blades, Wraith Guard, Wraith Lords all get access to the Battle Focus ability, which is what your army lives and dies by. Also, whenever a Psyker unit from your army dies, you're going to get a token. You can spend that token on any Wraith construct, and they are going to add 1 to the hit roll and 1 to the wound roll. This isn't as important as the Spirit Guides rule, but it's still pretty important, especially once you start to get more and more stuff into your collection and you start getting disposable Psykers. If you want to go the direction of the Spirit Construct, like I said, all of these lists are going to be starting off with the Combat Patrol, but the Spirit Construct is actually going to be picking up 2 of them. This is not the best overall deal because you are going to be getting too many Dire Avengers, but it is still kind of the best way to get started, as you do want Warp Spiders, and Dire Avengers are decent for their points to just hold objectives or do secondaries. Once you get to 1500 points, you're going to go pick up 3 copies of Wraith Lords. These are just going to be a good general powerhouse unit across the board for Eldar, but especially in this detachment. And then you're going to go pick up 1 box of Striking Scorpions because they are just generally great to have. 75-point units that infiltrate can be split up or run as one big brick if you really wanted to, and hits pretty hard in melee, triggers your other rules. Yeah, all that sounds great. Sign me up. Finally, at 2,000 points, you're going to go and pick up 2 boxes of Wraithguard and a final Spirit Seer just to be able to support them. For the 1,000 point list, the Spirit Seers can have whatever enhancements you want. I chose Light of Clarity, but Higher Duty is also not a bad choice. You are going to have to run one of the units of Dire Avengers as a 10-man because that's just what you have the points for and what you can work with. But having access to 2 units of Warp Spiders and 2 units of Wraith Blades is going to feel great. At 1,500 points, we've picked up Rune of Mist on one of our Spirit Seers so that we can give cover even when our Wraith Guards are out in the middle of the field and don't have cover in the event that you are playing on some kind of a weird table format. But really, the most impactful way to run them is going to be able to have some of them behind a wall so that you can regenerate them out onto the board. The Wraith Lords are general powerhouse units. The Ghostglaive is going to help out with anything they get into melee with. The Flamer helps out with all of the small stuff, and the Bright Lances are great at killing off the big things, especially if they are aiming at their destined target and being able to reroll their ones. And at 2,000 points, we've got 3 Spirit Seers who all have enhancements because we have extra points to burn. And you can see that we now have 4 units of 5 Wraith Blades. So now we've got 20 on the field who are going to be able to just repeatedly turn after turn after turn after turn go out into that midboard and bully our opponent. The Devoted of Yenneed detachment has 3 different detachment rules baked in that are all very good. First up, Lethal Intent is going to make it so that if one of your units dies, another one of your units can take a full move. Second is Lethal Surge, where if you perform a fallback agile maneuver, then you can end within engagement range of another unit. Situational, but helps out with being able to avoid being tied up and stopping your units from getting into their important melees. And then finally is Lethal Reprisal, where any of your units that are below their starting strength get the Fight's First ability. This is most impactful on the Incarn, especially as the Incarn does not have to heal itself all the way back up to full wounds. You can stay at 1 below starting strength and just always have Fights First. If you want to start collecting this army, it's actually going to be a very different style of collection from the previous 2, and this is not one that I've ever done before. But we're going to be starting off by picking up the Drakari Combat Patrol with the Kabalite Warriors box. This is going to feel weird if you're wanting to start an Eldar army, but Eldar in Yenneed get to run a lot of Drakari units, and it turns out that Drakari have very cost-efficient combat patrol. They have a lot of units that are very nice to be able to move around, use as bait, and just be cheap disposable trash, and it just makes a very nice, smooth package for the rest of the build. It also saves you a ton of money. If you want to see what my Drakari list look like, you can go check out my Drakari video. While some of the points may have changed, the general ideas are all still there. At 1,000 points, we have a very small pickup that we need to do. We just need to grab the Incarn, and we're going to grab 1 Venom. Importantly, we're not going to be building the Venom with any of the witches on the back of the boat. They are going to be put off to the side and held onto for later. At 1500 points, we're going to go and pick up 2 Wraith Lords and 2 more Venoms. And from the bodies that we have between these 3 Venoms for the Witches, we should be able to construct 1 additional 10-man Witch Squad. To round it out at 2000 points, this is where we get expensive because of all of the savings we had earlier. We're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Dark Reapers, we're going to be picking up 1 box of Striking Scorpions, and we're going to be picking up 2 boxes of Warp Spiders. Like I said, if you want to see the 500 point Drukhari list, go check out my Drukhari video. But jumping straight into 1000 points for this list, you've got the Incarn, you've got a Ynnari Archon with Borrowed Vigor, you've got 2 units of 10 Kabalite Warriors who are going to have all of the special weapons, and 1 unit of 10 that are going to have no special weapons. This is because you're going to be having a ton of extra bodies from the boats that came with the Drukhari Combat Patrol that you are not going to build on the boat. You're going to have them be off of the boats so that you can later use them as whatever you want. I would recommend that you magnetize one of the boats so that you can also have it turned into the Drukhari shooting platform on the event that you decide to also play Drukhari, which is one of the benefits of this detachment. The Incubi with the Demiclaves are going to be led by the Archon with Borrowed Vigor, and you've got the Raiders with Dark Lances and the Venom. At 1500 points, you're going to be adding in the 10 Witches that we were able to build by not including them on the Venom. And if you need more melee weapons to be able to put in their hands, you can probably fish something out of the Kabalite Warriors box and just stick it in their hand. They all have the same weapon profile, so it doesn't really matter what you give them. The Wraith Lords are going to have the same loadout that we saw inside of the Spirit Conclave, and all of the Venoms are going to have the same loadout. Because the Venoms can be used to split your units up, they also make a great way of separating out the special Kabalite Warriors from the bad Kabalite Warriors that don't have anything special going on, so that you can just use the bad ones to be bait to trigger all of your other important rules. I do have to say, at this point, you are going to have quite a lot of transports in this list. More transports than you probably want. However, at the end of the day, the detachment rules here, especially being able to move after another unit dies, is great with transports, because transports can either take that unit and dump it all the way in your opponent's backfield by having it move on your opponent's turn, then move on your turn for an effective double move on top of all of the agile maneuvers that you can do, but they also make a great way of giving your opponent fodder that they can kill to allow something else to move instead. And as we round it out at 2000 points, yeah, it's Warp Spiders, Striking Scorpions, and Dark Reapers. It's really hard to mess these loadouts up. And that's my overall thoughts for the Eldar. Overall, I think that it is a great army that is going to be very powerful and run a lot of tables before they get some balance nerfs. The Yanid in particular seem really devastating, as being able to have a move after your opponent is done shooting can potentially break the game if you're playing something like Guard or Tau or any kind of shooting focused Marine list where you don't really have a lot of melee that you want to throw at your opponent. Best part is if you decide to go down the Yanid route and then Eldar gets really bad nerfs, well, congratulations, you've already collected like half the Drukhari range and you can just go play that instead. I think that there is a lot of power in this codex. I think that a lot of things in it are completely viable. I think right now everyone is just hyper-focused on the Aspect Warriors and how good they are. But once those get tuned down, I think we're going to start seeing a lot of variety with things like the Warwalkers, Fire Prisms, and even potentially Spirit Conclave popping up and becoming a pretty dominant detachment. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.